I used to think I understood the forest. The way the wind moves through the pines. The way silence settles before snowfall. The way animals scatter long before a storm. But the morning I walked into that Montana forest to check on the hiker who called my outpost, I realized there is a kind of silence I had never heard before. The kind that does not come from weather or wildlife or the natural world. The kind that feels like the trees are listening to you, waiting for you, judging you. He had called just after sunrise, voice trembling, breath ragged. He kept saying a single word in a cracked whisper. Wendigo. I tried to calm him, told him the stories were old tales, warnings from a time before any of us walked these trails. But he insisted, and his panic was real enough that I drove to the trailhead at once. I stepped out of the truck and breathed in the cold air. Pine, frost, earth, nothing unusual. But the woods felt heavier that morning, like the cold had sunk into the soil instead of just the surface. His footprints led off the maintained trail into thicker timber, weaving through brush that most sane men avoid without a survival pack. I followed slowly, hand resting near my holster, scanning the shadows between the trunks. The deeper I walked, the quieter the world became. No birds, no wind, just the faint crunch of frost beneath my boots. Then I found the phone. It lay on a bed of dead pine needles, screen cracked, still faintly lit. A smear of blood was across the glass, wiped by a shaking hand. The battery was low but active, the camera still open, as if he had been trying to record something when it fell. Beside it, on the frozen soil, was a pool of blood. Dark, thick, already congealing. Far more than any cut or scrape would explain. It spread outward in jagged edges as if something had dragged it, smearing it toward the treeline. I knelt beside it, touched the edge with my glove. It was cold, but not as frozen as it should have been in that temperature. That bothered me more than I wanted to admit. I picked up the phone. A single frame filled the screen. It was blurry, distorted by motion, maybe by fear. But even through the smear I could make out the shape of a figure. Tall. Too tall. Bones showing through tight flesh. Eyes glinting like pale fire. I told myself I was seeing a trick of the light. A branch. A shadow. A reflection. But a second frame auto-loaded. Then a third. Each worse than the last. The trees around me seemed to draw closer. I whispered into the cold air, "You just panicked. Right, you imagined this." But the blood on the ground said otherwise. I slipped the phone into my jacket and swept my flashlight across the surrounding woods. The beam caught something on a tree trunk 10 feet away. Long parallel grooves carved into the bark. Deep, clean, straight, claw marks. Not from any black bear. Not from any mountain lion. I had seen both, tracked both, cleaned up after both. These marks were different. Longer, sharper, and higher than my head. The wind picked up then. Just a small gust. Enough to make the trees moan as they swayed. Except they did not sway. Not a single branch moved. The sound came with no movement, no breeze, no natural cause. It rolled through the forest like breath. A slow, cold breath. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. I turned slowly, flashlight sweeping side to side. The forest had gone utterly still again. Then I heard it. Soft, wet, steady, chewing. Something was chewing in the trees ahead of me. Slow, methodical, like someone savoring each bite. Not the snapping of twigs or the crackle of frost under hooves. This was the sound of teeth working through something dense. Something fibrous. Something that had no business being eaten out here. I took one step forward. The sound stopped. I held my breath and waited. The chewing resumed. Louder now. More deliberate. My stomach twisted. It was not far. 20 yards maybe. Hidden behind a curtain of pines where the shadows seemed deeper than they should be. The cold air thickened with the scent of iron. Blood. I whispered, "Hello." No answer. Just chewing. I clicked my radio. Static hissed back. No voice. No signal. No comfort. I had never felt so alone in that forest. The chewing slowed again, then stopped altogether. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. More dangerous. More expectant. Then, very faintly, I heard something shift. A slow dragging sound across soil. Not footsteps. something pulling weight, something heavy and patient. I took another step, then another. The forest watched me with 1,000 dead eyes. I reached the edge of a clearing, my breath fogging in front of me. My flashlight beam trembled slightly in my hand. And somewhere just beyond the line of trees, hidden by shadows thick enough to choke on, I heard something inhale. Long, deep, hungry. That was when I knew. The hiker had not panicked. He had not imagined anything. He had described exactly what he saw. The chewing sound resumed, just a few feet further back, and I felt the forest tighten around me like a closing hand. I whispered to myself, God help me, because I knew then that I was not alone. And whatever was out there was still eating. I stood on the edge of that clearing longer than any reasonable man should have. The cold crept through my jacket, stiffening my fingers around the flashlight, but I barely felt it. Every part of me was focused on the sound drifting from the trees. That slow, wet chewing. A rhythmic tearing that pressed into my ears until I thought I could feel it vibrating inside my skull. I swallowed and took one more step toward the treeline. The needles under my boots barely made a sound. The forest did not allow it. The silence had tightened again, pressing against my chest, turning each breath into something I had to fight for. Ahead of me lay a narrow trail, one rarely used and even more rarely maintained. The hiker's footprints marked a jagged path along it, each one increasingly smeared with blood. They dragged near the end, as if he had been pulled. I followed slowly, flashlight sweeping the ground. The first few yards showed nothing unusual. Frost, pine needles, bits of moss. Then I found the first sign. Fabric. A torn piece of jacket sleeve caught on a low branch. It looked as if it had been ripped clean off by something that did not care how much force it used. The edges were shredded, strings hanging like the frayed end of a rope. Another few steps and I found more. Bits of cloth. A glove. A boot print dragging sideways. Claw marks gouged into the dirt and bark. Wide and deep, spaced far apart. Whatever left them had a reach longer than any predator I knew. The chewing sound grew louder the farther I walked. Not rushed, not frantic, slow, purposeful, as if savoring, as if enjoying the meal. I whispered, hello, can you hear me? The sound stopped again. The woods froze. A moment later something moved, a fast shift of weight, a thud of something heavy against a trunk, and then a low groan, deep and hollow, like wind moving through an empty cave. Except the air was still. I raised my flashlight and stepped closer. My boots sank into the soft earth, leaving clear impressions in the trail. The smell hit me then, a metallic stench of blood mixed with something rotten, something old, something that had lived too long in the dark. I came around a bend in the trail and saw it. Shredded fabric, a torn backpack, a smear of blood trailing from one tree to another. And there on the trunk, carved deep into the bark, were claw marks that reached higher than I could touch even with my arm extended. The chewing resumed again, this time closer. I lifted my flashlight higher, heart pounding. The beam flickered, then steadied, then flickered again. The forest did not like being illuminated. A crack echoed to my right, a snap of a branch bending under weight. I turned sharply, light cutting between the trunks. Nothing, just darkness and trees that stood too straight, too still, as if holding their breath. The chewing grew louder, more deliberate. I took a step toward the sound. The ground crunched underfoot. Something in the darkness shifted away from me, dragging weight. Heavy weight. I whispered, if you can hear me, call out. I might be able to help you. Silence. No answer. Then the chewing returned, even slower now, almost as if mocking my words. My flashlight hit something pale on the ground. At first I thought it was snow, but the shape was wrong. Too smooth, too curved. Bone. Half buried in the frost. Clean on one side, shredded on the other. Something had stripped it with precision. My stomach turned. I forced myself to move closer. The chewing sound was now directly ahead. Somewhere behind a dense cluster of pines. A place where the shadows thickened, pressing together as if to hide whatever crouched behind them. My boots sank into damp soil. The cold air burned my lungs. Every tree around me felt like a silent witness to something ancient and merciless. A dry branch snapped under my foot. The chewing stopped instantly. The forest held still. Then, from the darkness ahead, something breathed. A long inhale, a rattling exhale. I raised my flashlight again. The beam shook in my hand. A flicker of movement crossed the light. Something fast. Something tall. I caught the barest glimpse of a limb, thin as bone but stretched unnaturally long. A pale shape darted between the trees, dragging something limp behind it. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stepped forward, against every bit of instinct screaming at me to turn and run. The creature moved again. Not away, around, circling. I knew that pattern. Predators did it when curious, when studying prey, when deciding whether to attack. Branches rustled above me. I swung the light upward, catching only needles and black sky. But I felt it. I felt something staring down at me, the weight of its gaze cold enough to raise goosebumps across my arms. The chewing resumed behind me. I spun. Nothing. The forest mocked me with stillness. Then something whispered my name. A dry voice, barely audible. A rasp. A mimicry. The sound of vocal cords that had not been meant to speak human words. Sheriff. The hairs on my neck rose. My breath came shallow. The creature had learned my voice from the radio. It had heard me. It had memorized me. And now it was testing me, playing with me. I backed up slowly, flashlight trembling, pulse roaring in my ears. Blood on the ground, torn cloth, drag marks, bones, and something lurking between the trees that should not exist. I swallowed hard and whispered to myself, he was telling the truth. The hiker was telling the truth. Something moved on the trail ahead. A shadow stretched across the ground, elongated by moonlight, thin, wrong, bent at angles that no living creature could maintain. The chewing stopped. The forest leaned in. Then I heard it. A growl. Low, hungry, inhuman. The Wendigo knew I was alone, and it was deciding what to do with me. The trail narrowed as I pushed deeper into the forest, and the darkness thickened around me until the beam of my flashlight felt like a thin blade cutting through a living wall. My breath fogged in the cold air, dissolving in front of me before drifting upward into branches that seemed to lean closer with every step. The forest had stopped pretending to be normal. It watched me now, silent and expectant, as if waiting for something to arrive in the space between one heartbeat and the next. I kept my hand near my holster, though I already knew the weapon would not matter. The claw marks on the trees were too deep, the footprints too distorted. Whatever was moving out there was beyond anything I had tangled with in my years as sheriff. But training is a strange thing. Even when fear claws at your ribs, instinct tells you to keep going. So I did. The chewing stopped again. Not slowly. Not with any natural pause. It ended as if someone had flipped a switch and drained sound from the world. The quiet that followed was worse than before. The silence became a presence, a weight hovering just behind me, heavy enough that I could feel its cold breath on the back of my neck. I turned slowly, sweeping the flashlight toward the trail behind me. Frost sparkled on the ground, but nothing moved. The trees stood like tall skeletons, stripped of expression. My own footsteps were the only marks in the snow. No other tracks. No signs of an animal stalking me. Then I lifted the light again, and that was when I saw the blood. A thin red smear dragged along a fallen log. Drops frozen in irregular patterns. A trail leading off the path and deeper into the trees. I stepped off the main trail, boots sinking slightly into untouched snow. The forest felt wrong here. The air tasted metallic, like I had just bitten my tongue. Something scraped behind me, a quick, subtle drag across bark. I spun around and caught only a flicker. A tall shape sliding between two trunks, too fast for my eyes to follow. Not a run, more like a glide. Silent, smooth, searching. My pulse hammered. The flashlight flickered again, the beam bending as if the air itself distorted it. I stepped backward. The snow crunched under my heel. A single dry leaf snapped. Then everything stopped. No wind, no whisper, no chewing, no distant groan of shifting branches. I froze, breath suspended in my chest. A shape stepped out from behind a distant tree. First I thought it was a man, tall, thin, but upright. But then it moved, and the illusion shattered. Its limbs hung too long, joints angled wrong, bones pushing against skin that looked stretched thin. Its ribs pressed through its chest, rising and falling with slow, unnatural breaths. Its face was narrow, almost skeletal, with hollow eyes that glowed faintly in the moonlight. Not bright, not human, just a pale reflection of hunger. It held something in its hands. Cloth, shredded, dark with blood. My stomach twisted as it raised the fabric to its face and inhaled deeply, as if the scent brought it closer to whoever it had taken. I whispered without meaning to stop. The creature's head snapped toward me. Its eyes locked onto mine. Cold, empty, ancient. It stepped forward, the movement fast and fluid, and every instinct in me screamed to run. But my legs refused to listen. I stood rooted to the ground as the creature lifted its head and let out a long, rattling breath. Not a growl, not a snarl, something worse. A sound like wind moving through a hollow corpse. I lifted my radio to call for backup, but only static hissed through the speaker. Sharp, loud, grating. The noise made the creature tilt its head again, curious. Took another slow step toward me. I backed away, hand trembling on my holster. The voice that came out of me sounded small, swallowed by the cold. Stay back. The creature dragged the bloody cloth across the snow and leaned closer. Its mouth opened slightly. Sharp teeth, thin lips drawn over bone. A faint curl of steam escaped its throat. Then it spoke. Not in words, in a voice. The same voice the hiker had used when he had called my outpost that morning. Help me. Every thought inside me crashed into a wall of ice. Hearing that voice come from the creature did something to me I cannot fully explain. It twisted my perception, tore at the seams of reality. The creature had listened, learned, copied, and now used the hiker's final plea like bait. The creature sniffed the air. Its fingers curled around the shredded fabric. It stepped closer, slow and deliberate, bones shifting beneath skin that seemed ready to tear open. His breath came in low, hungry gasps. I backed up until my boots hit a fallen branch. It snapped under my weight, echoing like a gunshot through the dead forest. The creature surged sideways, disappearing behind a cluster of trees with inhuman speed. I swung the flashlight wildly, searching. Nothing. Then a metallic scent passed through the air, thick and heavy. I turned toward the source and saw a trail of fresh blood streaking through the snow. Still warm, still steaming. The flashlight flickered again. The cold deepened. Then I heard it. Not chewing, not growling, whispering. A whisper shaped exactly like my own voice. Sheriff. The sound came from the ravine ahead, a pit of darkness where the moonlight could not reach. A cold draft rose from it, carrying with it the faint smell of decay. I stepped closer, against every piece of logic screaming at me to turn back. A shadow moved in the ravine, tall, thin, bending in ways no creature should bend. Crouched near something on the ground. A body, or what was left of it. Bones picked nearly clean, torn flesh, frozen blood, clothing ripped to ribbons. The missing hiker. My breath hitched. The creature turned its head toward me, slowly, carefully, as if savoring the moment before I understood the truth. Its eyes glowed faintly, its jaw opened, and then, in my voice this time, it whispered again. Help me. The forest closed in around me. The cold deepened, and I realized the hunt had changed. I was no longer searching for the creature. The creature was searching for me. Night comes fast in the Montana backcountry, faster than most people realize. The light sinks behind the ridges in a matter of minutes, leaving only a thin wash of gray over the pines before the forest is swallowed whole. As the shadows deepened around me, I could feel the temperature dropping with unnatural speed. The cold settled into my bones, stiffening my hands and tightening the breath in my chest. The Wendigo had moved back into the trees after mimicking my voice. I could no longer see it, but I could feel its presence like a second pulse beneath the forest floor. The ravine lay behind me with the remains of the hiker, his bones pale and scattered like the remnants of some ancient ritual. I forced myself not to look at them again. The image had carved itself into my mind already. The forest around me creaked softly as the cold intensified. Frost formed across the branches so quickly I could hear it crackle, as if the very air were freezing under the weight of the creature's presence. I tried my radio again. Static. A wall of it. The hiss rose and fell like breathing. I whispered into the dark, "This is Sheriff Hale. Anyone copy?" Nothing. The silence pressed closer. The radio crackled again, and for one horrifying second, I heard the faintest echo of a voice inside the static. My own voice, whispering the same word the hiker had said on the phone that morning. Wendigo. I dropped the radio. It hit the snow with a thud. The cold deepened. My breath fogged thick in front of me, swirling upward like smoke. I turned slowly, scanning the trees. Something had changed in the atmosphere. The forest was no longer just silent. Felt alert, watching, waiting. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not human, not animal. Something between. Slow and deliberate. They circled to my left, then to my right, then behind me. The creature moved without breaking a single twig, without disturbing a single leaf. I could only sense it by the faint vibration it sent through the ground. I backed away from the ravine and moved toward higher ground. The trail climbed steeply, flanked by deadfall and jutting rocks. Shadows stretched long across the slope, bending in directions that made no sense. The moon had risen behind the ridge, but its light barely touched the forest floor. A dry whisper passed through the trees. "Sheriff." My heartbeat hammered hard enough to hurt. The voice sounded close, much too close. The creature was using my own tone, copying my cadence, mimicking the way I speak when I am calm. But beneath the imitation was something else. Something hollow, something hungry. I took a deep breath and kept walking. One foot in front of the other. Slow, careful. My flashlight flickered as if the cold were pulling the power from it. The beam reached only a few feet ahead now, fading before it touched the trees. Branches shifted above me. I swung the light upward and caught a glimpse of something pale against the dark bark. A shape crouched on a high branch. Thin limbs wrapped around the trunk. A face too long, too narrow. Its eyes stared at me with cold hunger. The creature dropped from the branch. It did not fall. It glided, slow, controlled, as if the air held it in place. It landed lightly on all fours, then rose to its full height, taller than any man I had ever seen, ribs pressing against skin that looked stretched and thin. Frost formed around its feet as it stepped forward. I raised my weapon, though every part of me knew it was useless. My voice shook. "Stay back." The creature tilted its head. Its jaw cracked open in a motion too wide, too slow. Its breath spilled out in a white cloud, carrying the smell of rot and old blood. Then it spoke again. "Help me." But the tone was wrong. Too flat, too smooth, as if the sound were scraped from human memories that did not belong to it. The creature took another step. Its long fingers curled, claws dragging lightly across the ground. My hand tightened on the grip of my weapon. A gust of icy wind blew through the trees then, bending branches and sending snow swirling through the air. The creature stepped back into the storm of white. I blinked, and it was gone. Not vanished. Moved. Quickly. Silently. Somewhere to my left. I turned, heart pounding. Footsteps echoed across the frozen earth. Fast. Circling again. The creature was playing with me, testing the boundaries, testing my fear. The cold became unbearable. My breath hitched. My fingers numbed. I stumbled against a fallen log and steadied myself. The trees blurred for a moment, shapes blending into each other. I forced myself to focus. Then I saw it. Tall, thin, pale, standing between two pines near the trail ahead. His posture was still, rigid, like a statue carved from frost. But its eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the moon. The creature raised one bony hand and mimicked the gesture of waving. Not a greeting, a summons. Command to follow. I took one step back. The creature mirrored me, stepping forward. I whispered into the darkness, "What do you want?" The creature's jaw moved again. Slowly, bones shifting beneath skin. Its voice scraped out like something dragged across stone. Hunger. The word froze me with a terror so deep I could feel it in my bones. The creature stepped forward again, slow and purposeful. Its shadow stretched across the snow like a long spear pointing directly at my chest. Branches shifted behind me. Something brushed my coat. I spun, but nothing was there. The Wendigo had split its attention. One moment ahead, one moment behind. Its movement felt impossible. The forest had become its body, its voice, its camouflage. I turned back to the creature in front of me. It was gone. Snow fell silently where it had stood. I could hear footsteps again, but now they came from every direction. Faster, more frantic. The creature was circling at inhuman speed. Then it stopped. The silence became absolute. And from the darkness, in a voice that was not mine, not the hiker's, not any voice I had ever known, a whisper rose so close I could feel the warmth of breath on my ear. "Run." My legs responded before my mind did. I sprinted up the slope, branches clawing at my jacket, snow flying beneath my boots. The forest exploded with sound behind me. Cracking branches, heavy breaths. The Wendigo gave chase. And I understood then that the hunt was no longer a question. It had begun. I am an old man now. Old enough that the forest no longer scares me the way it used to, though the memories still do. I have lived long enough to watch the gray spread through my hair and the lines carve deeper into my face. I no longer patrol the woods, and I have not carried a badge in more than a decade. Yet the weight of what happened never left. It clings to me the same way the cold clung to my bones that night, persistent and merciless. I speak this now in the quiet of my home near the boundary of those same Montana woods, far from the official reports and the polished statements that were filed after the hiker vanished. This recording is not for the department, nor for the families who asked questions we never truly answered. This is only for the truth because I cannot carry it alone any longer. After I ran from the Wendigo that night, I did not stop until I reached the tree line. I burst out of the forest and collapsed near the ranger outpost, my lungs burning, my hands trembling so badly I could not even grip the doorknob. I remember turning back once, expecting to see the creature lunge from the woods behind me. The forest stood silent, still and black. Nothing moved. I told myself I was safe. I was wrong. In the weeks that followed, we searched for the hiker. Teams combed the ravine, the trails, the ridges. They found nothing. No bones. No clothing. No phone. The blood had vanished beneath fresh snow. Every physical trace of that night seemed to fade as if the forest itself had swallowed the evidence. But I remembered the phone. I remembered the blood. And I remembered the sound of chewing in the dark. When I submitted my report, I wrote that the man had likely fallen, died of exposure, or been taken by an animal. The department accepted it. They always accept the simplest explanation. People are more comfortable believing in mistakes than in monsters. But something changed in me. Every night I woke to distant sounds in the woods behind my home. Not the normal sounds of animals or wind. These were sharper, hungrier. Sometimes I heard branches breaking. Sometimes I heard footsteps circling the property. Once, when the temperature dropped below freezing, I stepped onto my porch and saw tracks in the snow. Huge, spaced far apart, more like leaps than steps. They disappeared halfway across the yard as if the creature simply lifted itself into the air. I never told anyone. The department would have called me unstable. The townsfolk would have whispered that I was cracking under the weight of my job. But the truth was more terrifying than any gossip. The Wendigo had seen my face. It had heard my voice. It had chased me through its kingdom and marked me with its attention. There were other disappearances. Not many. One every couple of years. Camper. A hunter. A drifter. The reports always ended the same way. No body found. No trace left behind. Only silence where life should have been. I stepped down as sheriff the year I found claw marks on the wooden frame of my back door. Thin and deep, carved clean through the grain. No animal in these woods leaves marks like that. And none of them climb the porch steps to the door of a man who once ran from the creature that hunts the forest. For a time I tried to convince myself that the marks were old, weathered, made by something natural, but I could not lie to myself forever. Not after I heard the chewing sound again. It happened 2 winters in a row. Late at night. Slow. Wet. Methodical. Something feeding in the treeline where the snow was thick enough to hide whatever it held. The first year I sat inside with the lights off and the curtains drawn. The second year I dared to look through the window. I did not see the creature fully. Only a faint shape between the pines. Tall. Too tall. Its outline moved with an unnatural grace, bending and rising like something half human and half nightmare. The chewing paused. The shape shifted. I felt its gaze sweep across the yard and lock onto my house. I ducked away from the window, heart pounding, breath shallow. I stayed still for a long time, listening to the forest breathe, listening to that thing consider whether to come closer. After a long moment, the chewing resumed, softer now, as if it were savoring the warning it had given me. I realized then that the creature had never stopped its hunt. It simply had not chosen to finish it. Not yet. Now, as I speak these words, I can hear the wind outside brushing through the trees. Every gust carries a sound that might be nothing or might be everything. A crack of wood, a crunch of snow, a whisper. My mind knows the difference between fear and memory, but my bones remember the truth of that night. The official report for the missing hiker claims he lost his way, fell into a ravine, and disappeared under the snow. That is a lie I signed. A lie I told myself would protect the town from panic. A lie that shielded others from the truth I was unwilling to speak. But the truth has a way of living inside a man until it needs to come out. I know what I heard that night. I know what I saw. I know what stalks those woods when winter comes. And I know it is still out there. Sometimes, when the wind is right and the forest leans in close, I swear I hear the same sound I heard beside the hiker's blood-stained phone. Chewing. Slow. Steady. Patient. Hungry. And even now, years later, I cannot shake the feeling that the creature remembers the taste of fear in my breath and the shape of my footsteps in the snow. I believe it remembers everything. I end this confession with the truth I have never spoken aloud. The hiker warned me he saw a Wendigo in the forest. I dismissed him, but when I found his phone near the blood in the snow, and when I heard that first terrible chewing sound drifting through the trees, I learned that some warnings come too late and some nightmares do not wait for permission to be real.